The wind carried a strange stillness across the valley the morning he signed the papers, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The ranch lay silent under a pale sky, fences sagging, the old farmhouse leaning slightly as though tired of standing, and yet something about it felt alive, waiting. He stood there alone with dust on his boots and a folded deed in his pocket, believing, perhaps foolishly, that abandoned places were not dead, only forgotten. What he did not know, what no one warned him about, was that this same ground would be marked off with red signs and armed checkpoints less than 48 hours later, and his quiet dream would collide head-on with a force far larger than himself. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet courage it takes to start over, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to channel name. Your support keeps stories like this alive. He had not bought the ranch because it was beautiful. In truth, it was worn and scarred, like him. The roof leaked, the well pump coughed more air than water, and the land bore the marks of years of neglect, thistles, dry soil, and fences that no longer remembered where they were meant to stand. But for him, this place represented a last line between who he had been and who he still hoped to become. Years earlier, life had stripped him down quietly and completely. A business collapsed, a marriage faded into silence, and a city that once promised opportunity slowly became a place that reminded him of everything he had lost. The ranch was not an investment, it was a retreat, a place to rebuild a life without noise, without judgment, without anyone watching. The first night he slept there, the darkness felt deeper than anywhere he had known. Stars spilled across the sky like scattered glass, and the wind moved through the grass in long, slow breaths. He lay awake on a thin mattress inside the farmhouse, listening to the creaks of old wood and the distant cry of something wild, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of belonging that did not need words. He imagined mornings repairing fences, afternoons coaxing crops from stubborn soil, evenings sitting on the porch as the sun sank behind the hills. The land felt honest. Hard, but honest. The second morning began the same way, with light spilling through cracked windows and dust dancing in the air. He stepped outside with a mug of bitter coffee, planning the day's work in his head. That was when he noticed the tire tracks. Fresh, deep, and deliberate, cutting across the dirt road leading to the ranch. They had not been there the day before. He followed them with his eyes until they disappeared beyond a rise, unease settling quietly in his chest. Still, he told himself, abandoned land attracted curiosity. Hunters, wanderers, lost travelers. There was no reason to panic. By noon, the sound came. Low at first, then unmistakable. Engines. Not one, but several, approaching with steady purpose. Dust rose on the horizon, and within minutes, vehicles bearing no familiar markings rolled into view. Uniformed figures stepped out, their movements efficient, rehearsed. Red and white signs were unloaded and planted into the ground with a finality that felt like a verdict. Restricted zone, they read, bold and absolute. The words seemed unreal against the dry grass and broken fences of his new home. He stood there, deed still folded in his pocket, watching as boundaries were drawn around his dream without his consent, without explanation. No one raised a weapon, no one shouted, but the message was unmistakable. This land no longer belonged to him in any meaningful way. The sense of isolation he had sought turned into something sharper, colder. He was not simply alone, he was surrounded by authority, by rules he had never agreed to, by a power that did not care about his reasons or his hopes. The days that followed blurred into a cycle of confusion and quiet resistance. Requests for information led to offices that redirected him elsewhere. Forms were filed, calls were made, and every answer came wrapped in vague language about national interests and public safety. He was told he could not enter certain areas of his own property. He was advised, politely but firmly, to remain inside designated boundaries. The ranch he had bought for freedom became a maze of invisible lines. At night, the lights of the checkpoint glowed faintly in the distance, a reminder that he was being watched. Sleep came in fragments. Memories of past failures crept back, whispering that this was just another sign he had reached too far, hoped too much. There were moments when he considered walking away, selling the land back for whatever he could get, and disappearing again into anonymity. But something held him there. Perhaps stubbornness. Perhaps the quiet bond he felt with the land itself, as if leaving would mean abandoning not just a property, but a promise he had made to himself. Slowly, he began to notice things others overlooked. The land had scars that did not match its history, concrete foundations half buried under soil, rusted metal protruding from hillsides, areas where vegetation grew differently, unnaturally. He realized the ranch had never been truly abandoned. It had been forgotten on purpose. Whatever lay beneath it was valuable enough to reclaim, yet inconvenient enough to erase from memory until needed again. As weeks passed, his frustration transformed into resolve. He documented everything, photographs, dates, official responses that contradicted one another. He spoke to neighboring landowners who remembered government vehicles decades ago, late-night activity, and sudden silence. Each piece of information strengthened his belief that this was not about safety, but secrecy. Still, fighting a system designed to outlast individuals took its toll. Loneliness pressed heavier each day, and doubt gnawed at him in quiet moments. What changed everything was an act so small it almost went unnoticed. One morning, while repairing a fence within his permitted area, he found a patch of wildflowers blooming stubbornly in soil that should not have supported them. Bright, fragile, defiant. He stood there longer than necessary, struck by the simple truth that life persists even under restriction. The ranch was doing what it had always done, enduring. Inspired, he shifted his focus. If he could not access every acre, he would care for what he could. He restored the farmhouse room by room, fixed the well, planted a small garden. He shared his story quietly online, not as an accusation, but as a human account of what it meant to lose control over something you had fought to build. People listened. They recognized themselves in his struggle, not against the government, but against systems that dismiss individual lives as collateral. Support arrived in unexpected forms. Letters from strangers. Legal advice offered freely. Journalists asking careful questions. The pressure, once crushing and invisible, began to surface. Officials grew more cautious. Boundaries shifted subtly. Restrictions were reviewed, then partially lifted. No apology was ever offered, but the silence that once surrounded the ranch began to crack. Standing on the porch one evening, watching the sky turn deep orange over land that was slowly becoming his again, he felt something unfamiliar but welcome, peace earned, not given. The ranch was still scarred. His life still carried losses that could not be undone. Yet the struggle had given him something no easy victory ever could, proof that even when power redraws your world overnight, persistence can redraw it back. Near the end of this journey, if this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you that resilience still matters in a world that often feels overwhelming, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to channel name. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who may be standing at their own crossroads. And before this story ends, we have one special request for you. Please leave a comment sharing what this story made you feel, or write a single word that represents hope, strength, or second chances. Your words matter more than you know.